Um, another question I wanted to, you know what? Before I forget, I promised myself I would make sure I ask you right up front because I got an email. I chatted with our last episode. I chatted with literary agent John Cusick for 2 hours and
Yeah.
never once asked him about flying saucers. It was a terrible failing on my part. So Dan Kenney, before we go any further with all your publishing expertise, all the things we could be talking about, nope, let's do this. Have you seen Flying Saucer, and what is your stance on flying saucers?
Okay, so I have never seen a flying saucer, but I'm 100% in on flying saucers. So I totally believe in them. I actually met John one time. We had lunch in Omaha, Nebraska, of all places. He was coming through town because he was going to a retreat that he was one of the agents for, doing critiques. And me and a group of other writers sat down with him and another agent and had a quick bite to eat. So he's a cool guy, but I can't speak for him. I'd like to say whether or not he'd come down pro or anti-flying saucer, but I'm not sure. But for me, I totally believe in him. Just haven't seen him.
Me too, 100%. I think there's more than enough evidence that even the skeptical folks should say, well, we should at least be investigating this thing. And plus, my grandmother saw one, and my grandmother wouldn't lie to me.
No.
So,
I've got a question for you. What would
sure.
be more impressive to you if we really landed on the moon in 1968, or if our technology was so good in the film studio that we really made it look like we landed on the moon?
Well, now we're really going into the weeds. I have heard it convincingly argued to me that we probably did, in fact, go to the moon. I haven't been convinced that that's not the case. I am convinced that NASA was up to a lot of trickery with some of their old footage. There are videos you can watch where the astronauts are clearly on wires and they're shooting in studios, but a lot of that stuff is them training and getting ready to go to the moon. And then there were some publicity shots I know that they used that they said were from space, but were actually shot here terrestrially. But I think that's just more a case of a publicist being overeager with some photos. But there is some genuine suspiciousness. I will say that if it were to be revealed that we faked the moon landing, I would almost be more proud of America for pulling that prank on the entire world than I would be if we actually landed on the moon. But for the record, I'm of the opinion that we probably did go to the moon. I haven't been there to verify the flags there, but I assume.
Very good. Well, that's part of your mission going forward.
Do you have strong feelings on the subject?
No, I just think it's so funny to think about. It's so funny to think about the idea that maybe we pulled a prank just to stick it to the Soviet Union and just to prove like how far ahead we are. Again, kind of like you, that almost gives me more satisfaction than if we were to really have landed on the moon. I think the biggest thing for me is because, man, I wish I could ask Susan this since she's the ex-NASA employee.
Yeah, she's probably laughing at us right now, I'm sure.
Yeah. But what I would love to know is, it does seem like we did so much so fast, between Kennedy announcing, let's do this, and boom, in 68, we really do it. It does seem like stuff stalled out kind of after that. I think it was that ability to do things so quickly that made people my age think, oh my gosh, by the year 2000, the world's going to look a certain direction. And it does feel like things just didn't go quite as quickly in the direction I thought and many of my contemporaries thought. So I'm curious as to why. I just would love to talk about that more.
Well, I think that human innovation can't be discounted. I think Philip Corso was kind of a goofy fellow, but I've always been intrigued by his notion of using flying saucer technology to advance things. I think there could very well be a kernel of truth there, but it's also the kind of thing that where if it could be definitively proven to me that all flying saucer videos were hoaxes, there was never anything to it. I wouldn't want to know that. I like living in a world where that there's a possibility that that's true. So I acknowledge that up front, that I want that to be true.
Right, that's what I feel about Bigfoot. Like, I don't think there's a real Bigfoot, but man, I love this possibility that maybe there is this weird society of these Bigfoot creatures. I love that.
One thing that got me over my fascination with Bigfoot was, I think it was Joe Rogan. While I'm plugging podcasts you could be listening to right now, not that he needs a plug, but the Joe Rogan Experience was actually a fascinating episode. First one I've ever. You ever heard of Joe Rogan?
Oh, I've watched his podcast on YouTube a lot.
Oh, he's fantastic. There is an early episode where he had Neil deGrasse Tyson on, what forever endeared him to my heart, because I'm not an MMA fan. I didn't watch Fear Factor. I barely remember news radio. But he had an episode where he had Neil deGrasse Tyson, of all people, on, and they discussed whether or not the moon landing is fake. Go find it. It's like a 45, 50-minute discussion. And at the end of it, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson convincingly proves the case that we did go to the moon. But I like that Joe Rogan was able to get him back on his heels so many times and to come back at him with evidence. It's just a fascinating episode. But on Bigfoot, he said that if we found a Bigfoot, we definitively captured it, and we put it in a cage or a zoo or someplace, then that would just really be another animal in a zoo that wouldn't be as exciting. And we have many animals already in the zoo that are absolutely fascinating.
Absolutely.
Rather than focusing on this other one that might exist, it would just be a larger ape, a larger monkey. However we ended up classifying it. But I have heard when you get really nutty, the thoughts that there's a secret society and they have advanced technology living in the woods, and sure, why not?
Yeah, why not? I love it.
If you really want to get down to it, and man, we're so far from publishing. I promise we're going to pivot back before people turn the show off. But if you really get down to it, I'm more than half convinced anymore about Elon Musk and some other folks that are trying to prove that reality is a simulation. I'm on board with that. That makes sense to me. I'm looking at the difference between video games in my lifetime, from Atari to Red Dead Redemption 1 to Red Dead Redemption 2. And I'm like, oh yeah, but we could totally create an entire reality within 10 to 20 years. That's a thing that we could do. And if we can do it, then how do we know we haven't done it?
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, it's fascinating stuff to think about. And I'm willing to entertain it all.
That's how this goes from a friendly podcast about writing and publishing to a cult.
Yeah, what was the name of that weird late night radio show that was always on when I was like in high school and stuff?
Coast to Coast.
Yeah, that weird stuff. And my brother, what was the guy's name?
George Norrie's the second one. Art Bell was the first one.
Oh my goodness gracious. Oh man. Okay, bring it back to publishing. Okay.
Well, I listen to that stuff just for I write sci-fi, and I always say that the conspiracy theories, even if they're all lies, are the best science fiction out there, because those guys are really thinking about how to try to suck in the rubes and overcome those objections of plausibility.
I like that. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
So true or not, it will sharpen your storytelling skills.